It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dan Gospe, who is the Chief Operating Officer of DMI Networking, a company specializing in dental technology and HIPAA compliance. Dan's introduction to HIPAA began 15 years ago when he managed a trauma registry at his local hospital, where he found himself navigating the corridors to find a key to the shredding bin. Since then, his appreciation for understanding the reasons for HIPAA compliance and how to effectively integrate them into healthcare operations while minimizing headaches has become a personal passion. Since then, Dan has conducted hundreds of in-depth risk analysis of both dental practices and hospital departments. He has authored numerous articles on HIPAA best practices, and we are pleased to have him join today. My God, you were born in the middle of Silicon Valley, Santa Rosa, California. I mean, how have things changed since you were in grammar school?
Oh, man. I mean, having phones in your pocket now, it's crazy. The kids have access to all this information. It's a totally different world. I'm raising a 13-year-old girl, and her life, it's just so different these days. Everything is so connected. Well, you got online all the time, and if you're not, then you feel like you're really missing out. That's,
well, I mean that iPhone has more computer processing power than what landed on the moon with the Apollo mission. I mean, Neil Armstrong didn't have an iPhone on the moon, and when we were little, when I started out, the phone was a party line, so everybody on the block had the same phone. So if you picked it up, someone was talking, and you had to say, "Could everyone get off? I need to make a phone call." And only rich people had a camera, and you had to buy film, and then you had to have it developed. And now these kids are walking around with 100 songs in their phone, 100 videos, 100. That's why it gets me so mad when people talk about wages. They say, we haven't seen wage growth. It's like, really? Well, have you seen how this generation lives 10 times better than I was a kid? I mean, they got all these things. Now, is HIPAA, is your main deal IT or HIPAA compliance?
These days, it's mostly HIPAA. And when it started, it was mostly IT, but it kind of, as the needs sort of grew, especially after 2013, when the omnibus rule passed, which was the final rule of HIPAA. And that rule basically broadened the scope to business associates. So all of a sudden, we had to pay attention, No longer could we just, make other people compliant. We had to do all the same stuff too. So it's kind of justice, right? From the dentist perspective, it's like, yeah, you better have to do the same stuff you're telling me to do. Well, now we do, and we've had to for about 7 years now. So once that happened, I sort of knew, like, okay, I know HIPAA, and I know that we need policies and procedures, and so I just kind of dove into it for us. It kind of became probably 60-70% of my job at this point through consultations and doing our own internal compliance.
And so we have dentists listening from around the world. Is HIPAA just a U.S. thing, or other countries like the EU, do they have similar things?
They have similar things. They have the GDPR, which is kind of a new data standard. It's pretty... I think it's probably better than HIPAA because it's more clear, I think, in terms of, there's more resources for it. At least that's what I've seen. And I haven't dug into GDPR very much, so I don't know a whole lot about it. But HIPAA is nebulous. And I think as the technology is more defined now, I think the new standards like the GDPR, they have real black and white ways that they can write it initially. Part of the problem is this law was written in 96? It was a long time ago, and we didn't have, all these protections are being defined for things that we didn't have a way to do. So it's incredibly nebulous, and it's it's a mixture of old law and new law. And it's whereas GDPR is like, it's more, this is new, this is how it is. It'd be nice
if you were the supreme dictator of the United States. Would you throw HIPAA out? Would you change it, or is it for the most part good? Or what are your thoughts on it?
I think there needs to be more clarity about it, but I do think it's good. I think if you consider yourself, you're a patient of numerous places. You trust all these people. You trust your banks. I mean, I know it's not patient information, but you're trusting these people with your data. If they don't have standards, then who knows? They don't know technology. They don't know what the risks are. So what HIPAA aims to do is to say, hey, let's, do yourself a risk assessment and, kind of understand what do you have in your practice that, how is data traveling around where there might be some risk there, and try to, do what you can to address it. And that's sort of all HIPAA can do. Like, that's all they can do. And so I don't know if that answers your question. I think
I wonder if there is any data security more. Everything you hear about Amazon and all these apps recording your voice with Alexa and all these apps recording your voice, it's kind of like, my gosh, I mean, if you look what Facebook and Amazon and Google are doing with your data, I mean, it almost makes me wonder if it's a weird world. It's a weird world we live in, and there is privacy's dead. Do you think privacy is basically dead?
I do think privacy is on its last legs. I don't know that it's dead. I think you can take precautions. You can keep all your data encrypted locally before you send it anywhere. You can lock down, any data that you're managing on your own. In terms of like, you're a member of Blue Cross, so you probably have, I should say, so I probably have my personal data everywhere, and there's nothing I can do about it. My privacy's dead. Maybe you're right.
So my homies, they want to hear about how to do root canals, fillings, crowns. I mean, we're chefs. We're in the kitchen. We want to cook. What does a dentist have to know about HIPAA?
A dentist does have to know the risk. They have to understand, you're a steward. You are personally a steward of all these people's data. It's not your data. I think that's one misconception. This is the patient's data that you're holding for them. It's their data. So the idea is you just want to protect it as best as you can. And the way to do that is to know your risk. And so I think that's just it's kind of an obligatory ethical thing where, hey, I'm going to manage all this sensitive data. You know what? I'm going to protect it too. So I'm going to understand the risk behind it. So in that way, I think it's reasonable. It's a reasonable expectation. What I don't like is how HIPAA is broadcast, especially by marketers. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of just misinformation out there, misquoted statistics. I can give you examples of things that are used all the time. And that kind of stuff is that's really what's developing the landscape of how you see HIPAA as a dentist, right? Because all you know about it, really, unless you're going to read the law, all you know about it is the people marketing to you. And so to me, when I see a lot of people marketing based on fear, that really bothers me. And I think it does a disservice to the community. Now, at the same time, you should definitely fear some of it, right? I mean, some of it is like, yeah, you should, but fear is the wrong word. You just want to be responsible for it and just kind of understand your risk. You don't have to fear like fines if you just do a risk assessment and understand it. And that's really what I try to kind of drive home. And you don't have to spend money to do that.
So,
you know what I mean?
So HIPAA, there's, my gosh, I can't believe it. 5%. Shoot me an email, howard@dentaltown.com. Tell me who you are, how old you are, what country you live in. 5% of the emails, they're in college applying to dental school. And then about a quarter are in dental school. And then the rest are all up to and never surpassing 30. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. It was enacted by the Congress and signed by President Bill Clinton in 1996. And you say there's a lot of fear mongering in the marketing, yeah. and that doesn't sit well with you. What are they saying fear mongering that's not sitting well with you?
Let me give you an example. So 2018, and you might hear this stat from other companies. 2018 was a record year in fines, right? They'll tell you, yeah, in 2018, a record of $28.7 million in fines were levied for HIPAA. And that's all published. And what people will do is they take that number and market it. But 18 million of that was the Blue Cross breach, which was huge. And if you take that outlier out, actually 2017 was... No, I'd have to check my numbers to see if it was more or less, but it certainly didn't break any records if you take that one outlier out. And so to me, that's not honest. To use that number isn't honest marketing to me. And I've seen like a lot of articles about this, like, wow, it's a record year. Well, how about why is it a record year? Because of one outlier. That's why.
So Yeah, so you're talking about Anthem paid $16 million in record HIPAA settlement fines following largest U.S. Health data breach, and Anthem is a what is it? It's a subset of Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
I don't know if it's the main. I think it's the main body, but I don't know. I could be wrong about that.
But that was Anthem is an independent licensee of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And what did Anthem do? Licensee of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. What did they do to earn a $16 million HIPAA fine?
That's a good question. So I'd probably have to review because I don't remember that specific breach very well. But I do know that generally the big fines are when they give you a plan to kind of mitigate your risk and then you don't follow through with it. Let me just look.
What I thought was sad about that is it was after a series of cyber attacks was the data breach. So they actually got fined because they weren't, cyber attack proof?
Let's see. I know I shouldn't.
We'll pass on that because that's a big target. So if you're a big cyber attacking hacker group, you want to go out after Blue Cross and Blue Shield or Anthem. You don't want to go after Howard Friend's little dinky dental office in Phoenix, Arizona. Are you seeing dentists getting hacked into?
No, actually, one time, yes, and the dentist password was a single letter, and actually they did get breached. They did get hacked into. But no, I've never seen a real targeted attack by anyone that took their security seriously.
So then,
it doesn't happen.
Yeah. So your network, your website is dminetworking.com. What percent of your business is dentistry?
Oh, 95, 99. I mean, we have a couple CPAs, but mostly it's dentistry.
And who's more boring, the CPAs or the dentists? I mean,
I don't think any of them are boring. I mean, you never know, what you're going to walk into sometimes with a computer issue, and I think that's what makes it so interesting.
And so when someone goes to dminetworking.com, what are you doing for them? You're keeping their data compliant, network secure. You can install dental networks. You can do HIPAA compliant remote and on-site support. What is your main bread and butter? What are you doing for dentists?
Yeah, well, we like to get people on full support plans where we can, manage their systems. We have their antivirus, their backup, encrypted email, basically all of the things that outline every requirement that HIPAA needs. We have a service to address it. And it's just all that stuff with the HIPAA risk assessment and a network audit, which is pretty comprehensive. It's about a dozen reports. And we try to bundle all that into a reasonable value, or a reasonable cost. We think it's a high value for what it is.
And what is that cost?
Well, it really just depends. I mean, we won't actually do anything like our lowest contract is $415 a month, and that's like if 5 computers or less, and then just up from there, just depending. And it also depends what they want, right? Because if they don't want encrypted email, then we don't need to sell it to them. So, sometimes I can lower the price a little bit.
So do you think cloud-based computing, I mean, wouldn't that be one way of getting rid of all this, just not to have any of your hard drives in the office and have a bunch of dummy terminals doing a cloud? I mean, when I'm on my iPhone, when I'm surfing other sites, I mean, it's all pretty much all your iPhone activity is cloud-based, right?
Right, and it all has to do with how are you going to monitor access to your data, right? And some cloud systems do have that in place, but they'll never have your internal documents. They'll never have financials, emails that you receive, any patient letters you're working on, or anything you save to your computer. None of that is going to be managed. And you need to have anything with patient information. You need to have an access log. You need to be able to say, yes, this file was deleted at 3:37 by, Etta over on Front Desk 3. That would be the ideal setup. And you can get that set up with a standard server. So it's just about whomever installs the server needs to know about the compliance requirements. Because all these things can be set up on the get-go.
So you talk about having a disaster recovery plan. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the disaster recovery plan, and this is the one that's usually missing for most dental practices because you can't really just use a template. You really have to gear it towards your dental practice. And it's your response to the three different kinds of disasters. There's physical, electronic, and natural disasters. So the physical disaster is like, somebody stole your laptop. The electronic disaster, somebody hacked my router, and finally the natural is like tornado, flood, fire, something like that. And so you actually need to outline, for each response, you need to have sort of a checklist of things that you're going to go through. And one of those items on your disaster recovery plan needs to be to vet whomever's doing your disaster recovery. So what I mean by that is, you can outline all your responses, but if you're relying on your IT company to basically take control of your disaster, then right when you start doing business with them, you should look at their disaster recovery plan. You should, say, hey, what are you going to do if my server goes down at 3 a.m.? And then you can just say, well, here's our policy. This is what we do. It's really important to do that just for your techs. Like as somebody who employs techs, you don't want them to get in a mode where they're like, oh, the server's down, I don't know what to do. You want them to have, okay, this is what's going on. I can go through my checklist and I can go bit by bit. So that plan needs to be in your internal disaster recovery plan too, or at least you need to know about it. Maybe you don't have to document it, but you need to know, what's going to happen worst case, and then test it every year.
So, what are when you do a HIPAA risk assessment, where are dentists really falling short? But before I go with there, are you agnostic to the practice management information systems? I mean, are some practice management softwares like Dentrix or EagleSoft or Open Dental or any of those better than others? If there was some young kid listening to this that wants to start his own dental practice in a year, would you recommend one dental practice management software over another?
Yeah, I mean, we are agnostic. We don't mind working with anyone, but I think it's easiest for us from a tech perspective to work on Open Dental because it's so
nice. I did not see that coming. Everybody listening is going to say, "Oh, Howard just got him on the show to say that." I had SoftDent for 30 years, and by watching Dental Town, it's so great because most all the threads on Dentrix and EagleSoft, all the threads are just, everybody's just bitching and moaning and complaining. And then the threads on Open Dental, they're all happy. And so I switched to Open Dental. But you like Open Dental. Why is that?
Well, when you call them, they know who I am. Like they remember people. You call them up, they remember you. It feels like a small office. There's a little bit of hold time. It's not that bad. And then the techs are like, when they're working with third-party stuff, they're just smart. They're just smart techs.
I'll tell you how good they are. They're the only practice management software system that does not advertise. And in fact, when I tried to get him to come on the show, he didn't want to get on the show. He's afraid to get too much attention because they like to take their time and onboard slowly. And they don't want 100 new, just like Peter Dawson. I remember in all Peter Dawson's lecture, he's like, who are these people getting 100 new patients a month? He goes, it takes me 40 hours a week to work in 15 new patients a month. How the hell can you treat 100? Because he was doing all that, complete dentistry stuff. But Open Dental doesn't even advertise. They don't even want, they don't even want more business. That's how well they're growing. But you're saying it's from a customer service point of view, but it's not the open architect that you like more?
No, well, it's that as well. It's it's the ethos of the company. I like that they charge what it's worth, and they really stand behind their product. I mean, it's not like you get a Shine Tech who one of 10,000 employees or however many. I don't know how many. It's just different. It feels more homegrown. And I think there's more of a connection you can have with the people that I've spoken with there.
Now, do you think Open Dental will be a cloud-based in the future?
Yeah, I do. And there's already there are people already developing some plugins for that capability. For example, I know somebody is working on a Google Chrome extension. I don't know if it's ready yet. And then there's something else I read, and I forget, the name escapes me now, but because it's an open architecture, people who are they're really innovating off of it. And so, yes, I think for sure there will be cloud. They already support, if you get your server on the Amazon cloud and have it, you can buy out the processing power and the RAM and have it hosted on the server. They're already supporting that. So you can already do that.
Well, and which cloud support would you recommend? Is Amazon, is Jeff Bezos is that the best cloud? Or, I mean, Microsoft's big in it, so is Oracle. What's your thoughts on cloud?
I like the Amazon cloud because I'm familiar with it. But that's all I can say about that. I mean, I really haven't looked at, I think because I've used it for so many years, it works. It works well.
So do you think a dentist, if they're going to redo their practice software, should go to the cloud, or is it more bleeding edge and not quite leading edge?
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a good term. I think it is bleeding edge because you have to realize if you go to the cloud, you need a backup internet connection, or you risk maybe going down, and that represents a cost. And then you still need to be able to manage all your internal network. So, you're still going to need some kind of Windows server, whether it's, maybe it's like a $1,700 entry-level server. You still need something, even if it's not hosting the data. Well, and that's, I think, they get frightened by the word server and they think it's going to be super expensive, but you just need something that's going to run the Windows Server operating system. And if all you're doing is your Active Directory, you're only doing your the management of your internal computers, then you can get by with an entry-level box, no problem. And it's just like a souped-up computer, 1,700, something like that.
Yeah, I personally think it's bleeding edge because I remember when these phone companies came out with a voice over internet protocol. So now all your incoming calls are digital and you can do all these things with it. But so many people on Dental Town, when they switched to that, they had no idea how bad their interconnection was. They thought it was good when they were using it on their phone and all that kind of stuff. But you never realize how bad your interconnection is until you switch your phones to internet VoIP. And then but I think we're getting very, very close, but I still don't think it's there. And if it was there, go ahead.
It's latency, which is the big one. So people will look at their bandwidth and they'll say, I got 50 down and 10 up, which is totally fine. But the problem is they'll have high latency, and especially when you're using Dentrix and some others. But every time you hover over Dentrix and you hover over one of the appointments, it gets data read and write from the server, reads, I guess. If there's latency on that, even just moving around, you see noticeable lag, just like moving your mouse around. It's trying to get all this data, and each call is adding 20 milliseconds or something. It adds up. If it's displaying 20 different data fields, then your 10 millisecond delay, it starts to add up. So that's something a lot of people won't look at. They'll just do an internet speed test. That's great, but test your latency. That's going to be the limiting factor. Yeah. Especially with Dentrix. Not with Open Dental, especially with Dentrix.
So talk about your background, your story. Why did you get into this? How did you? I mean, you're in the middle of Silicon Valley. You could have been working at Uber, Facebook, Google. You could have done anything you wanted. How did you get into this?
It's funny. Excuse me. When I think about my life and the decisions that bring me to where I am, it all feels very random. But I suppose there were some decisions along the way. I took a physics, I majored in physics and I got my BS in physics. And then I ended up working in the hospital for a temp job. And I was just doing data entry. And then from that, I got into the trauma registry management and then fell into the Hipaa role through that. So, and the trauma, I mean, if you want to talk about headaches with Hipaa, the trauma services department is debilitatingly oppressive in terms of what you need to do in order to report on data that is de-identified. Even you can't really do anything. And in one sense, that's good. But like everybody else, they're taking all this information about this law and they're doing the best they can with it. It was a little bit oppressive at my old hospital. So anyway, when I came in to this, I was thinking, I don't think you need to do it this way. Now, I was not the privacy officer there at the hospital, but I did work on the risk assessments for that department. And I just thought, this is all addressable. Why are they? I mean, the funniest thing is like, my desk, there is a shredding bin, and, I put my documents into the shredding bin when I'm done with them or whatever. But there is no key in the shredding bin. You had to go to the manager of medical records, which was a different department. And it wasn't just the manager, you actually needed the department head to get the key. And then she would come in, unlock the thing, and she would watch you. And then you'd pick up the document, and she would look at the document, and she would write something down, and then she'd leave. And that's what I had to do. And it's like, are you serious? Like, that isn't right. That's not necessary. So anyway, when I saw an opportunity to like work in this field and not be so heavy-handed with it, but still be secure and reasonable, then that's sort of like, it felt good to me. That's what I wanted to do with it.
So is HIPAA very different for a hospital versus a general dentist?
Yeah, and it is and it isn't. Like, at the baseline, it's not. You have to encrypt data in transit. You have to do all these certain things. But when you're at a hospital level, it's actually required, if you're going to take Medicare, you have to have a risk management department. And so what that does is it centralizes this whole thing, and then all the other departments will do their risk assessments and give it over to the risk management department. So it's taken incredibly seriously. Medicare and Medi-Cal are like a huge, they definitely will do whatever they can for that. I think that's why it's taken so much more seriously in hospitals. But like you alluded to earlier, it's nothing is guaranteed. And you can be, set up as many systems as you can. You're still relying on your lowest common link to not drop a flash drive somewhere. You're still relying on that human element. You can never really 100% eliminate that. So you always have to be aware. You just always have to train and just know. If somebody's got unencrypted data on a USB drive, you got to address it. When you only have 10 employees, you can do that. When you have 2,000, what do you do? It's much harder.
Yeah, the big DSOs, they're held to a different standard of care than a small mom and pop, correct?
Definitely, yeah.
How many employees is the cutoff? Is it 50?
I don't think there's a cutoff, and that's, like the nebulous law, right? It's there's not really a cutoff. It's just, if you're going to take Medicare and Medi-Cal in a hospital environment, then you need an actual department to manage the risk.
Yeah, and you know what? Every time I see a dentist that gets really, really, really in trouble and goes to jail, it was because they were doing something with the government, Medicare, Medicaid. Medicare is for 65 and over. Dentistry is not really in there, but each state has Medicaid. I know it's confusing to our international listeners, but Medicaid is for the poor. My gosh, you get into a dentist will be. Most dentists don't take Medicaid because the fees are too low, and then the ones that do turn out to be high volume, low fee procedures, and a lot of them get sloppy. And then if something goes wrong with Medicaid, it's go to jail time. I mean, it's so hard to do business with the government because it's like petting a lion. I mean, he's all cute and cuddly until he's not, and then you're dead. Medicaid is dealing with the government on this stuff. The one thing I always worry about is, and everybody knows everyone's doing it, is you're talking to your specialists on emails about cases. And you probably shouldn't say, Dan Gospe, this is his root canal and it's failed, and all this stuff like that. What do you see a lot of red flags between dentists talking to the other 10 specialists?
Yeah, and more people now are using encrypted email, but a lot of people still aren't. For people who maybe they aren't using it, I think they think it's hard for the recipient. There are so many different options, though. There's one company called RPost, which we use, and it's really nice because it does some things technically in the background that don't require a password usually. So that's the letter R, and the word post. They're either retail or you can get it from your IT. They're pretty good. Anyway, all that aside, yeah, I'd say a good majority are not using encrypted email, and they should be, definitely. It's, the technology behind it, like a lot of people will ask, well, how come I can send a fax, right? How come I can send you a fax that has all the patient info and it can sit there for 5 days and that's compliant, but I can't send you a simple email? And the answer to that is when you send a fax, it's a direct line to line, right? I'm calling a phone number from a phone number, and that's a direct connection. When I send an email, though, it bounces through dozens of relay servers, and I can't say anything about the security of those. So all I can do in order to secure myself through those relays is to encrypt the message on both ends, or to encrypt it and then unencrypt it when it gets there. So that's the reason why, it just eliminates some of the scope of access to the data.
So how does a dentist listening to us right now know if his email is encrypted? Would you have to have some RPost software installed?
Yeah, you would know, because you'd either be paying for it or you would have designed a system on the pretty good. There's an encryption called PGP. It stands for pretty good, or PGP, pretty good protection, I think. Anyway, there's free ways to encrypt it, and you can password protect, and you can do it. But you would know if you're doing it right, because you're either paying somebody or you're doing it.
So you recommend RPost. So should someone, do they need you to install that? Can they do that themselves?
They can go direct. I'm happy to help anyone out. But they can go direct to RPost. They're, they're good. If somebody's not super good on IT support, definitely have your IT company check it out, or of course they can give DMI Networking a call if they want.
Yeah. What else, Hipaa, do you think these guys are listening to you on their way to work don't need to know more about?
I think the risk assessment is so daunting for people, and I really want people to understand that it's a process, but it's a logical process. Like, if you can approach it and not have the emotional sort of component to it, and just say, okay, this is a template for a document I need to fill out, and it's asking me this, so I'll logically go to that. Like, if you can approach it like that, then you can learn so much about what the law is asking, and then you can you'll see all the fear-based stuff. You'll be like, well, I don't need to do that, So I think there's so much power in knowledge, and I think it's really important to do your own risk assessment. Like, sure, get a consultation, and if you have somebody like me or like somebody else do that, just make sure you actually sit down and go over the results with them. And that's the one thing that's missing with a lot of the risk assessments I do, is very few people will follow up once I send them the documentation. Once I send them the final thing, a lot of times I won't even hear from people. And really, you guys really need to understand it. And it's only going to take you, a finite amount of time to get there. So I think that's my big.
Now, can you do all of this online? I mean, what if the dentist is in Salina, Kansas, and you're in San Jose? Because can this all be online, or are you more a regional play for Silicon Valley?
Yeah, no, it can be all done online. I do prefer to be on site. I prefer to meet with the staff. But when that's not possible, we can always do a conference call. The main thing that I don't get when I'm not there is I'm not able to see if I can overhear conversations. I'm not able to, physically look at their security reminders or any patient-facing documents. And then I also need to see their policies. So if they have electronic policies, or if they're using the ADA Complete HIPAA Compliance Kit, which I'm familiar with, then it's hard for me to do one, and I'll say I won't be able to do it. So
are you flying around a lot?
No, my home base is here, and I haven't traveled.
So you're mostly doing. What percent of your business is around where you can drive in a car, and what percent is totally virtual?
Yeah, so probably about 70% is local to us, and about 30%. And really, it was. Honestly, Howard, it was Dental Town is the reason that we were able to grow. And this was I think 4 years ago now. So now we have many clients scattered all over, and those are all remote clients that are happy with us.
And you can pretty much do everything remote for these townies spread out all around?
Yeah. There's a great one of the programs we use. It's called DATO, DATTO, and it's got this component. It allows you to get all kinds of information on your network. It does these really great network audits and gives you really pretty reports. And you can really pin it down. You can say, well, it looks like there's an iPhone that connected to your Wi-Fi, and why isn't that one on the guest? Things like that. You're picking that kind of stuff out. basically we let the thing run for a week to get any alerts that we can get, and then we'll present it as a network audit. And that pretty much is all you need for the electronic risk. For the physical risk and like the privacy rule and things like that, that really takes a more in-depth conversation. So if I can't be there in person, then I like to have a conference call set up where the dentist is comfortable, like it's not just crowded around a desk with their office manager leaning over. Like I'd like them to sit down and just kind of create a conference call situation. And then if that's a doable thing and they're interested, then I can do it that way.
You know, a lot of these, I hear a lot of people saying that one of the problems with dental offices is that they got, they got 5 employees, they got 5 different terminals, and some are on Windows 8 and some are on 10, and that they don't know how the RAM, the microprocessors. Like in our office, I buy 100% just of the computers, just from Dell, only because I can look at my account and see exactly what year I bought the computer, the RAM, just so I got the structure involved. A lot of do you think a lot of people, a lot of dentists are doing that, where they just have all these different computers and processors, and it's just not a stable, optimized system?
Yeah, definitely, especially with these replacements that are going on now. I know we didn't mention this, but Windows 7 is ending its life next January, so a lot of people are trying to find out if they can upgrade to Windows 10 or if they're just replacing their computers. During that process, they're finding a big mismatch. I actually logged on to a computer today that was Windows XP, and I was surprised, actually. I was like, I haven't seen one of these for a while. But anyway, yeah, there's a big hodgepodge for sure. And I think that's the way, as long as you have a handle over your inventory and my front desk machines are a little older than the ops and you're going to replace those a little bit sooner. Like as long as you're managing that, there's nothing wrong with that.
So is what you do for all the IT for Hipaa also really solving another problem of getting hacked into? I mean, some dentists, I had it happen to one of my sons. One of my sons had a laptop, and he logged on one morning, and he was supposed to pay a ransom, and his computer was completely shut down. And I hear those a lot on Dental Town. I just told him to throw his laptop away, because how could you pay someone a ransom in Bitcoin? I mean, if they're who's not, right. I mean, you don't even. It's like, okay, you need a new laptop. Let's throw it away and start over. But is solving your Hipaa problems also solving your hacking problems? Because I know a lot of dentists. Like I don't want to keep any patient's credit card on file. I mean, I don't want someone to. I don't want to see the newspaper someday someone broke into Howard's dental office, stole his computer, and they got credit card information on 1,000 people in Phoenix. I mean, that would just. So are you kind of solving 2 problems at the same time, hacking with Hipaa? Yeah.
To an extent, I think there's additional security things that should be added to your basic compliance. So. We basically want to exceed compliance with everything that we normally offer, but then there's other things like there's something called Crypto Prevent, which is a reactive ransomware software that detects if ransomware got through anything. So if it finds it, then it's able to stop it and say, hey, we're shutting your computer down because you have ransomware, before it actually does any damage. So that's, it's really cheap. I mean, it's $1 a month, a computer, and it's like, that's not necessary. It's not mandatory, but it's sure saved some of our clients. It's tried and true, and we like to put it out wherever we can. So that it kind of goes from the compliance thing. I think to address security, though, you can't just do what compliance tells you. You need to actually, find what holes you need to plug.
So on Dental Town, we have 50 forums, and one of the forums is government regulation, and Hipaa is just a huge forum on that. What about online patient forums being Hipaa compliant?
Yeah, well, you need to make sure the form company you're using is compliant. And the way you do that is first of all, they sign their business associate agreement with you. You don't want to put your own forms up on your site, though. You don't want to create a situation where your patients are typing anything into your site unless it's like a contact form, unless it's like contact us. Because if you do that, then you've increased the scope of your access, not only outside your office, you've increased the scope of your access to the entire internet. And so that becomes a big thing that you have to address. And so really the best way to do that is just to go with a company that specializes in it, like a forms company that will sign their BAA and explain the technology to you so that you know, yes, this is all encrypted on this end. There's no way that it's going to get gotten into.
Any names of those form companies that you like in dentistry?
The problem, excuse me, the problem that I have is they're pretty expensive, the ones that I've looked at, and I don't have any names for you of ones that I'd recommend. It's a project of mine to try and find somebody to recommend for forms, and I've looked at a few, but nobody I can recommend at this point.
Some people just think that the compliant is so stressful and so hard that they want to buy insurance. Just like, I don't even care if I'm HIPAA compliant. I'm going to have insurance, and then if I'm not, it's like when one of my 4 boys gets in a car. Like, I don't care about the car. I want to know if anybody got hurt, and if everybody walked away. Let State Farm deal with all that. Do you think a dentist should buy HIPAA insurance?
Well, yes, but I also think that, let's see. I mean, yes, they should definitely buy insurance, but I don't think they should use that as a way to not really fully deal with HIPAA. One of the things that'll happen if you're involved in a breach, a significant breach, is that you have to release all the information to the press. And then that's, sure, yeah, you have insurance, that's great, but are you going to have any patients left after your massive breach? I don't know. I mean, there's also just, you're going to do, you're a business owner, you're going to do what you're going to do to run your business. Your ethical concerns are your ethical concerns. That's fine. For me, I feel like if you're managing this data, you should at least look at it, I think I went on a tangent there.
No. And if you were going to buy HIPAA insurance, how much would you recommend getting?
Oh, just like, I don't know. I think like $5 million.
$5 million?
I would probably have to look.
Wow. What about insurance billing? I mean, when you're doing electronic claims, you got all kinds of information going across the internet.
You do. And a lot of those are through their encrypted little plugins, like, the dental exchange and all that kind of stuff is all encrypted the way that they're transmitting the data over. So they're pretty good.
I also notice on emails, I get a lot of emails to howard@dentaltown.com, and I can always tell if it's someone as old as me because they got an AOL email. When I see AOL, I start laughing. Are some emails more encrypted than like Gmail? I'm thinking Google's the godfather of that type of stuff. I get a lot of emails from Yahoo, Hotmail, all these from the older dentists. Do you think? Is there one email you think that should be used more than the others?
I think, like you mentioned, Google is a really good one. I would stay away from Yahoo, especially, but also to a lesser extent AOL and Hotmail. Yahoo's been breached a numerous number of times. I have a Yahoo email account that I've had to change the password on for several times, and I don't do anything personal on there. I really don't trust it. So, yeah, sorry, Yahoo, but I don't really care for Yahoo. I think Google's great because then you can, if you like the Gmail interface, you can actually build your own custom domain name with Google, and you can just keep using that interface. And then being that it's on Chrome, there's a whole bunch of extensions, and it's like the open infrastructure with Open Dental kind of thing, where you have all these APIs, all these programming interfaces that people can contribute innovations to. So I really like Chrome and Google.
Well, to me, it's when you go to a dental convention, there's always some kid lecturing, and he's an SEO expert, and he's telling you everything he knows, and I'm always sitting there thinking, kid, if you knew anything, Microsoft would hire you to go work at Bing, because if Microsoft can't figure out why Google has 92% or whatever the search market, I mean, how does a kid lecturing at the Holiday Inn know? But it just seems intuitive that if Google is the number one search engine out there, that on my website SEO, Why would you have a Yahoo or an AOL or, and Google's owned by Alphabet, which owns YouTube. So my website, it's got, YouTube videos, Gmail account. I mean, it's like I want to stay in all of Google's properties. I can't imagine if there were two dentists near me and one of them was on AOL and Yahoo and Hotmail and the other one was on Gmail. I mean, wouldn't Google just kick them over to my house?
I think so. I mean, it's way better to have it streamlined.
Because if you look at all their behaviors, the first behavior they seem to emulate is total world domination. You know what I mean? I mean,
I know.
Yeah.
What I like about Google though is that they do well. You know what I didn't like about Google was the thing about China, like the whole censorship thing. They were going to release and I don't know the details, but they were going to release a censored version of Google for China or something. And I kind of had a problem with that. Not a huge one, but I didn't really like it. But in general, they're kind of fighting for privacy rights. I mean, they've gone to court to not hand things over. Are they perfect? No. I mean, it's a big business. I'm sure there's corruption and all that stuff.
So there's overlap with HIPAA and security and not getting hacked into. Is there overlap with what you do with OSHA too? Is HIPAA, OSHA training, is that kind of overlap at all?
Well, maybe to a degree. I think some OSHA might overlap with HIPAA. I think if you go through OSHA compliance, you're going to have some things addressed that are HIPAA as well. But the reverse is not true. I think if you go all out on HIPAA, I don't think you're going to be OSHA compliant at all. Because OSHA is a lot more about how you're doing things, how are you keeping things safe and clean and secure and things like that. It's different. So yeah, just doing HIPAA wouldn't really address the things that OSHA needs.
Do you ever see this HIPAA compliance used in dentist marketing? I mean, every dentist is trying to have their unique selling proposition. They're a cosmetic dentist or they take your insurance. Do you see anybody touting their HIPAA compliance or security to be a...
No, I never have. I see people saying state-of-the-art technology. No, people don't generally, and I think a lot of the patients might not know what it is. And that's the thing, companies like ours, dentists pretty much have heard of HIPAA, but a lot of patients probably haven't. It might be wasted marketing. I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out.
So how often does your company, do you know how many dental offices you work with, ballpark?
Yeah, so under contract, we had a little shy of 300 in January. And then there are people that call that aren't under contract.
Well, 300, that's a big sample size. I mean, everybody listening right now just barely understands their one little dental office, and that's why it's so valuable to listen to someone who sees 300 dental offices. A McDonald's sells a hamburger, fry, and a Coke. What are the three main issues, problems, solutions you're doing with 300 dental offices? Sure.
Well, backup is for sure the biggest one, and disaster recovery and backup. I think a lot of people, they'll be backing up the files of their database maybe, or they're backing up this or that, but they're not getting the entirety of their data set. So I'd say the big takeaway is if you're doing a backup, do a complete server backup. Do the whole image. Don't do just files and folders, because if you do that, it's a pain to restore. And if you get the whole server, then you can throw that onto a different computer and you can run it. You might be able to virtualize it if you're using that kind of software. So that's really big. Just make sure you're getting a full server image backup as one of your backup sources.
And how often should you do a full server backup?
Oh, daily, every day. It should be part of your backup plan.
And is it backing it up to something off a remote site? Is it just backing from the C drive to the D drive? Talk about what is a full server backup.
Sure. So there's actually a lot of different ways you can do it. And the company we use, it's called Acronis, Acronis. And it's really versatile. And so one of the things you can do is you can send the backup to a NAS. And a NAS is a network attached storage device. So basically it's a box that holds your backup, and it's fireproof and it's waterproof. They're about, $1,300, $1,500, something like that. And it just sits there. So that can hold your full backups. And you can virtualize off of that. So basically your server goes down, you can take any one of your Windows 10 PCs, as long as it has Windows 10 Pro, 16 gigs of RAM, and you can boot up your server from that NAS device, which is really incredible. So that's a good way to do it.
So what's the name of that device again? You said it was a Cronus?
Acronis is the software that we use.
Cronus is the software. Kronis?
Acronis.
Spell it again.
Acronis.
Okay, so that's the software you use for the backup.
Exactly. Yeah, and so it'll do both a cloud and a local backup, and it encrypts them. I get to create my own encryption key, so the Acronis people don't know what it is. And so you can make it go to a NAS, and that's a really good way to do it. Another way you can do it is have it go to an actual Windows 10 PC with 16 gigs of RAM. And if you do that, then the data is local to that machine, and it can boot up your server virtually. And I know I'm using some jargon, so if I'm losing you, let me know. But basically you can boot up from your backup super quickly if you make one of your destinations a Windows 10 professional PC. That's the state of the art.
So Acronis is the software. What was the name of that little box you talked about? The backup box.
Oh, the NAS. NAS.
NAS?
Yeah, and companies like IOSafe have them, or Barracuda, Seagate, they all have them. We generally get IOSafe.
IOSafe. And it's made, and the company's made by NAS? IOSafe. IOSAFE. Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
And so those things have a couple of drives in them. They have 2 drives that are mirrored in them, or you can set them up with more. We've set them up with 2. And then, so if one of the drives fails, you're still getting your backup.
Huh. So you get that software, and then you have that little safe box, and then if you have a natural disaster, a flood or a fire, it's all there. And when you back that up every night, how long does it take to back something like that up?
Yeah, the first backup takes usually a few hours, and then after that, we just do incrementals, which only take like 5 minutes, and we'll have them go, depending on the practice management software, we'll either have them go every hour, or if it's a software that you have to close the database with, like EagleSoft, then we'll do the full backups at night. But anyway, the incrementals only take like 5 or 10 minutes. They're very quick. And then every Sunday we have it run another new full backup from scratch. So we keep like the old history.
And in dealing with dentists, how many dentists do you think, listen, there's 211,000 Americans who have an active license to practice dentistry in the United States. How many of them do you think do what they're supposed to do with an active backup? Full server active backup every night?
More now. As I meet new potential clients, a lot of them do have it in place. So I am heartened by that. A lot of people are taking their backup seriously. I mean, some people aren't, but it's a lot more common now. Good. And I think because it's cheaper. It's cheaper now. I mean, Acronis is, like, we're able to bundle this virtualization technology in with our basic server service. And like back when we were using Shadow Protect, we used to have to charge $150 a month additional to offer that service. So now with Acronis, there is no line charge. Everybody gets it, and all our techs get to sleep easy at night because they know that there's a way to get back up.
So with your 300 dental offices, what type of other issues are your bread and butter? I mean, when you're driving to work on Monday, what are you usually thinking you're going to have to see with hardware, computer maintenance, all that type of stuff?
It's funny. Usually the mornings are pretty quiet, so I'm usually doing installations, and I like to get there at a little before 6 Pacific, just because we do have some people on the East Coast. But generally, our phones don't ring as much as they used to, and it's not because we're not busy. It's because we're being a little more proactive, I think, and we're able to schedule things as projects more rather than have to deal with emergencies. But the most common call, I'll tell you, the most common call we get is about printers, for sure, especially HP printers. Yeah, printers are the worst.
And what's your thoughts on these printers?
They just, they'll lose their network connection, or they just do funky things. You can set them up on a static IP, and that usually, if you're able to tell the network exactly where it is at all times, that's called a static IP. If you set the printer up in that fashion, it does pretty well. But even still, they jam, they go through ink. The drawer says it's closed and it's not. I haven't met a printer that I can say this is a great printer.
So you don't have a recommended on the printer?
I don't really. I mean, I like the Brother printers. Those are, and again, this is from a tech perspective, right? I like working on Brother printers because they're easy. But I mean, printers even the big all-in-ones that people spend a lot of money on, the network stuff will need tweaking, or printers are a high maintenance thing. If you're, so what we do to try and not have printers be such a big problem is every day we have scripts running on all of our clients' computers that will reset the print queue, because that used to be they get to the office and they'd be like, I can't print. And 9 times out of 10, it was because their print queue was jammed up. There was a job in there that wasn't getting through, and that was jamming up the whole printer. And so now with all of our devices are now resetting that print queue, we don't get many early morning printer calls. We still definitely get a lot of printer calls. And I think people purchase kind of cheaper printers. I think there's an idea that printers should cost about $200 or $300, but I think if you really want to get a printer that's good, you might want to look more like $600, $700.
And you have to always get a printer with a maintenance contract. You got to have someone.
For sure.
Otherwise, yeah. Especially
big beasts, yeah, for sure you do.
So was there anything that you wish I would have talked about that I wasn't smart enough to bring up, or you're hoping to cover?
No, I think it was a great conversation.
All right. Well, thanks for being a townie. And answering questions on Dental Town about all that kind of stuff like that. That help. What the dentist has to wear too many hats, and the reason DSOs have taken 12 to 14% of the market, and I'm sure this is 2019. I'm sure they'll be at 20% of the market in within 5 years, is because the dentist has to wear so many hats. I mean, it's hard enough just to learn how to do the root canals, fillings, and crowns, but to learn HR and financial accounting and managerial accounting and marketing and IT. I mean, there's just so many dang hats. And what I'm trying to do is find great people like yourself to share information. So these dentists having to wear so many hats. When you're dealing with 300 offices, is the dentist the one that just has to own this whole issue, or is it usually the office manager, or who owns this?
Usually it's the office manager, and that's usually the strategy you want to do as a dentist, is you want to be able to, somebody you trust that you work with that can be your privacy officer. You want to designate them that title. They'll use it on their resume. They'll love you for it. You'll never lose them though, right? But anyway, designate somebody to do it, and then they'll actually take it on. Because if you, and it's nothing against, any business owners or dentists or anything like that, but if you're trying to run a business, there's so much coming in and out. If you can just designate that to happen, and you're paying the labor to have it happen, make sure you know what the principal, what the outcomes are. And make sure you understand that risk assessment as it gets delivered to you, but have somebody on your staff that's doing it.
Yeah.
Unless you can, if you have the time to do it, that's great. I love dentists that have the time to do it, but nobody has the time to do it. Very few. So
a dentist needs a hat. He can't wear all the hats, and it's just amazing when you have a dental assistant who's doing all your marketing. She's right there in the office. She has an iPhone. She's taking pictures, uploading them on the website, social media. It's great to have an office manager who does all this stuff, and you're never going to build this team unless you start attracting and retaining great people and slow down your employee turnover. And the dentist goes in the office and they got 5 employees and no one's been there more than 3 years. They're the ones having everything go, everything's just disarray. So the reason I can do what I do is because my whole management team, they've all been there 20 years plus. And when someone's there for 20 years, you don't have to micromanage. So hire slow, fire fast. I'm glad to see that the majority of your 300 clients are having an office manager do this. Because again, being a dentist, I can tell you, it's almost impossible to stay up on clinical dentistry, let alone to do Hipaa and OSHA and marketing and advertising and accounting all on the side. So, last question. Do you see in all these deals embezzlement being a problem?
Embezzlement in which way? From employees to dentists?
Yeah, where a staff's actually where you're trying to get encrypted emails and all this. You notice Shirley is over there stealing from the office?
I'll tell you, it's happened before. We've had a couple clients go through that. So, yes. That does happen.
Well, I've gone through that, and I had the data crash. I forgot what year it was. I think it was in the 90s. Computers were just coming out, and our computer crashed. And it was no big deal because we were backing it up. And we were supposed to, I don't remember the technical, I think we were supposed to back it up to the D drive, and we were backing up to the C drive, so we lost everything. We just lost everything. So all the accounts receivable that was owed, the insurance billed. I mean, it was just a several $100,000 loss. And the embezzlement was back when we were still on checks and pegboard, where a check just never cleared. But I walked over across the parking lot to Chase Bank, and I did not know this until I asked them why this check didn't clear, and they said it cleared. And I said, well, no, it didn't. I didn't write a check. It's empty, it's missing, whatever. And they showed me a picture of my dental assistant cashing a check at the counter. So I brought back the picture and I showed it to her, and she just bust out bawling and ran out the door. And that was the end of that. That was in the I think that was in '89. Man, thanks for all that you do for dentistry. Thanks for focusing on dentistry. And thanks for coming on the show today and talking about something that no one wants to think about. It was a pleasure to podcast you today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Howard. I appreciate it.
All right. I'll see you on the boards on Dental Town.